I think we've seen certainly a large section of the media finding itself completely compromising on the core values of this profession. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And that leaves me hugely disillusioned, particularly because some of them over the years have been colleagues that I work closely with. And to see them practice the kind of journalism that they have over the last 10 years, virtually being even endorsing at times communal dog whistles, has been, yes, disillusioning, disturbing. Don't forget the manner in which a number of small media houses have been targeted in this country. I really feel you asked me about are you disillusioned? I'm just re emphasizing that. When I saw fellow journalists, many of them young, many of them idealistic, many of them I admire, senior journalists being raided early in the morning at 6 a.m., their mobile phones being snatched. Some of them have not even been given back their mobile phones, their computers being seized. I'm talking about NewsClick, what happened to NewsClick, and other small media organizations in different parts of the country. I hope someone consistently speaks up for them because they are the ones who deserve all the support that they can get.
Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Many of us have political questions that rarely, if ever, get answered. They could be about Narendra Modi and Rahul Gandhi, the BJP and Congress, the way our system functions or our institutions behave, the mood of the country and the treatment of minorities, or changes that we believe are necessary to make India stronger. Today, I shall put those questions to someone whose profession is to raise questions and seek answers. More recently, he's also acquired an enviable reputation for writing insightful books on India's elections, the most recent of which was published recently, and here it is. It's called 2024, The Election That Surprised India. He is, of course, the well-known television anchor, Rajdeep Sardesai. Rajdeep, I want to raise the sort of political questions that often occur to people, but they feel they can't answer adequately. With your experience as an anchor and as an author, I believe you're perhaps best able to address them. First, how do you account for Mr. Modi's incredible popularity? It's lasted for over 10 years and it shows very little sign of abating, if at all. How do you explain this?
First of all, Karan, wonderful to be in conversation with India's best interviewer. And I'm not saying that out of flattery, but I genuinely have always believed that. I remember our fond times from Devil's Advocate days at CNN, IBN, and later, of course, at India Today. So wonderful to be in conversation with you. Karan, you mentioned 10 years. Think about this. Actually, Narendra Modi has been in power 23 years. When you look at both Gujarat as chief minister and then as prime minister, and he hasn't really lost a major election where he's been on the ticket. And I think partly, Karan, the answer is he's been at the right place at the right time. Think about Gujarat. He comes in a way into power or into his own in the backdrop of the 2002 Gujarat riots that scarred and divided Gujarat and made him out to be this hero of Gujarati Asmita, of Gujarati Hindu Asmita in a way. And he was a huge beneficiary of that. Then he comes to power at the center, Karan, against the backdrop of the 5 years of UPA 2, where there was a general sense of public disquiet, dare I say, anger against what was seen as a weak government that wasn't acting against manifest corruption. Along comes Mr. Modi and says, I'm the knight in shining armor who's going to be incorruptible and transform this country and bring in Achhe Din. So you have Mr. Modi both in Gujarat and then in Delhi, almost like a populist nationalist, preying on the anger and grievances, particularly of the Indian middle class, dare I say, at a time when Hindutva's influence is growing, preying on those angers, preying on that anger, preying on the fears, anxieties of a large section of the people, and being a huge beneficiary of that. So I think one reason is Mr. Modi's own brand of politics, which preys on fears, anxieties, and then projects himself as this nationalist populist who's going to deliver the country and the state from the past that he believes was dark. So that's one. More importantly, Karan, I think unlike other nationalist populists that we've seen the strongmen leaders across the world, he's also got a mighty machine backing him up. Arguably the most formidable election machine in the history of independent India, both in terms of its cash resources available and the commitment of its cadres. So I think that makes a huge difference. And I think the role of the media, so it's that's the other M, if I may use that. There's Modi, there's the machine, there's the media, which for the most part has been unwilling to really question him, and thereby has mostly been fawning cheerleaders. And frankly, then you come to the state of the opposition, which has been, for the most part, disjointed and unable to articulate an effective response to the Modi brand of politics. I think that's why I said right time, right place, because he comes to power at a time when the Congress, the other major party, is in somewhat in disarray, struggling for leadership, weaker perhaps than ever before. And the BJP, riding on a growing rightward lurch, as well as the rise of Hindutva, becomes a much more powerful force. So that might at least partly explain the longevity of Mr. Modi in Indian politics over 2 decades without losing an election is, dare one say, whether one likes Mr. Modi or not, a reasonably formidable achievement.
There's a lot in that rich and wonderful answer. Let me pick up some of the issues that you raised one by one. To begin with, if you were asked what is the single most important attribute that underlies Narendra Modi's appeal, what would you identify? Would it be the strongman image that you talked about? Would it be his incredible, often spellbinding oratory? Or would it be the caste orientation, the fact that he's an OBC in a country where, until him, OBCs didn't exercise that much power?
You know, Karan, I don't think you can look at just one factor when you're analyzing this Modi phenomenon, if I may be allowed to use the word, because I think if you just suggested that because he's a strong man and that's that single most attribute that allows him to stay in power, I don't think that would tell the full story. I think it's a bit of all. I think the fact that he's a strong man makes a difference. The fact that he comes from an OBC community, certainly to my mind, the OBCization of Indian politics is one of the dramatic shifts that's taken place in Indian politics in recent times. The oratory can attract some. It can also repel others. I mentioned in my book his Baswara speech, which many will see as brazenly communal and a communal dog whistle when he spoke about Mangal Sutras being snatched away, a speech in Banaskata where he said your buffaloes will be taken away. Now, is that oratory, or is that, as I said at the start, preying on the fears and anxieties of a large section of people? So it's not one factor. I just think that Indian politics in the last 2 decades was going through a period where the Congress, the principal national party, was retreating, and something had to fill that vacuum. And along comes Mr. Modi, who takes it. You know, the Advani Vajpayee era, Karan, and you'll remember it well, was built around the principle of the BJP emerging as a contender for power. By the time Mr. Modi takes over, the Congress is in such seemingly irreversible decline, some would say, that you need a preeminent national party and a leader to fill that vacuum. Along comes Mr. Modi. So it's a combination of his strongman image, the fact that there's an OBCization of Indian politics, the oratory. But I think at the end of the day, it's the rightward lurch of Indian politics. The Hindutvaization was waiting for a brand ambassador who would unapologetically espouse Hindutva politics. And Mr. Modi did that in a manner that I don't think either Advani or Mr. Vajpayee did, because they came through the Nehruvian consensus era. Mr. Modi is the first prime minister post-independence, to be born post-independence, 1950. And I think he doesn't carry that baggage of the Nehruvian era. In fact, his project, to my mind, is to dismantle the Congress once and for all. That, when he talks about Congress Mukh Bharat, or his various associates and supporters do, they genuinely want to do that. They want to build a new, very different kind of politics. And he was, in a sense, the ambassador, the mascot of that kind of politics.
Now, the other thing you mentioned in your first answer is the BJP. Over the last decade, it's become an incredibly successful political party. Even elections that it's expected to lose, like Maharashtra, Haryana, Madhya Pradesh, it wins almost overwhelmingly. What explains this incredible political cutting edge that it seems to have?
Karan, as I said at the very outset, the BJP, and I now include the entire Sangh Parivar, is easily the most formidable election machine that has been crafted in independent India. It's even bigger than the Congress in its pomp in the 1960s, because it has access to resources, it has access to technology, it has access to human cadre. And we saw that in Maharashtra. What is less known is that the RSS had 60,000 meetings in the last 3 or 4 months, targeting specific OBC groups, Dalit groups, holding these street corner meetings, which where influencers were used at the village level. They have a huge WhatsApp-driven entire WhatsApp call center-driven entire industry, if I may call it, which works on, again, uh, building up right from the booth. They have these booth level committees that are populated by very committed cadres, and some of the WhatsApp messages that are put out are designed, again, to prey on the fears and anxieties. One that I saw in Maharashtra, for example, on the last day, was to suggest that the Siddhi Vinayak temple, the much revered temple in Mumbai, would be taken over by the Waqf board one day if the opposition comes into power. But I think in all these states, their micromanagement and their planning is something which drives the BJP juggernaut forward. It is quite incredible the amount they invest in elections in terms of their planning and the arsenal that they have at their disposal. Nothing comes close to it on the other side, particularly the Congress. If you see, the regional parties are in a better position at times, Karan, to combat the BJP, because they also have a certain organizational structure on the ground. The Congress, on the other hand, doesn't seem to have that. So the BJP's organization enables them to win seemingly losing elections. I must confess, when I went through Haryana, I could see palpable anti-incumbency. But the Congress sort of scored a self-goal with their conflicts over leadership and their and almost taking the election for granted. In Maharashtra, the BJP, just particularly the RSS, invested a lot of their personnel as well as money power. Karan, it's astonishing the amount of money that now is percolating on the ground at election time. We saw that in Maharashtra. Sarpanchs told me that they had never seen such money in their lives. Now, that, together with the BJP's organizational machine, their technology available to them, their WhatsApp groups, all of that makes for a very, very formidable election machine that can even win seemingly losing elections like Haryana.
In contrast to the powerful, effective, formidable BJP, the opposition seems unable to get its act together. You half answered the question I want to ask, but I want you to go that little bit further. In 2024, Congress may have done a lot better than it did in 2014 and 2019, but it still ended up with something like 41% of the seats that the BJP has got. Why is Congress not just failing, but at times appearing to flail?
Karan, this is not something that I believe has happened only in the last 10 years. It's not that the rise of Modi resulted in the decline of the Congress. I think we have to go back to the fact that since 1989, or since 84, 84 was the last Congress majority at the center, the Congress has been a party in decline. I think 2004 and 2009 gave us the false impression that the Congress was on the path to revival. The Congress has not crossed that 30% vote mark since the elections of the 1980s. That means that essentially you're no longer a dominant player in politics. And I think the issues are organizational primarily. It's ossified or fossilized at the organizational level. The same faces. Someone once said, half jokingly, nothing succeeds in the Congress as much as failure. You fail, but you still remain in the positions you are. So there's an organizational problem, Karan. There's a leadership problem. The truth of the matter is the Congress hasn't had that kind of strong, vibrant leadership which is consistent enough to take on the opposition, to take on the BJP, both at the national level and the state level. You have the occasional leader emerging, but it hasn't been over a sustained period of time. And even ideologically, Karan, look at the compromises over the years the Congress has made. At one time, they were a party that was opposed to mandal politics. Today, they talk of a caste census. At one time, Rajiv Gandhi started his campaign from Ayodhya. Then they were uncertain over the direction in which they wanted to take secularism. So the very pillars of the Congress system have over the years weakened to the point where, in a direct fight between Congress and BJP, and we saw that in Maharashtra also, the Congress often comes second best. They just don't have the arsenal with them to take on a rampaging force like the BJP. So there are a variety of reasons, Karan, but I think primarily the Congress's problem has been organizational. And in Indian elections, which have become much more competitive, Karan, now than they were in the 60s, 70s, and even 80s, unless you have a strong, robust organization on the ground, whatever you do, the old days of just waving at rallies and, coming in occasionally just before the elections to campaign doesn't work. The Amit Shah brand of politics and social engineering and working at the local level, the booth level, uh, is something that the Congress is simply unable to match. So that I think post 2014, it's become the problems have got accentuated because the BJP strengthened itself. But the problems have been festering, Karan, for the last 3 decades, in my view, in the Indian National Congress.
Rajiv, what about Rahul Gandhi? It's often said that he's not cut out to be a politician, but circumstances have forced him into becoming one. To what extent is that true, and to what extent is that being a little unfair?
Karan, very interestingly, in my first 2 books, the 2014 and 19, I quoted a line that would, people would sort of smile. Rahul Gandhi's never missed an opportunity to miss an opportunity. It was something that was said about Yasser Arafat by the Israelis, I think. But it appeared that he wasn't willing to do the hard yards. I think we have to be fair to him post 2019. I think there have been moments that Rahul Gandhi has shown the ability to be a bit of a marathon man, do the hard yards. The Bharat Jodo Yatra was an example. But the yatra itself cannot be a substitute for organizational inadequacies. The yatra cannot become a political strategy. So I think if Rahul Gandhi has shown himself to be a sort of activist, courageous, willing to take courage of his convictions, willing to take the battle seemingly into the enemy camp, into the Modi camp or the BJP camp, it hasn't been accompanied by any focused political strategy or an attempt to organizationally fix the party. So you can be an activist that pushes seemingly the party increasingly towards far left positions that may be applauded by some at times, but it leaves the centrist space open, which the BJP now occupies. It also means that the organizational fix that you need isn't being attended to. I mean, there are still Congress leaders who tell me that it's not easy to get an appointment with Rahul Gandhi. These are senior leaders. They still seem to, the communication channels that need to be there don't seem to exist. So there's an element of ad hocism, and you can't run a political party on ad hocism. And I don't think it's fair to put all the blame on Rahul Gandhi. It's almost as if, is Rahul Gandhi sort of this magician who's going to turn around the fortunes of his party, which have been on decline, as I said, for 30 years? I don't think so. But I think Rahul Gandhi needs to decide what is his role in the Congress. Is it just as of an ideologue, activist who's sort of giving a certain moral compass to the party? Or is he willing to do the nitty gritty that you require when it comes to ticket distribution, when it needs to faction management? A huge part of the Congress is how do you manage faction or any political party? Now, he hasn't invested, I think, enough time and effort in that. And should he not, then someone else needs to. I mean, he doesn't have an Amit Shah equivalent in the party. Mr. Modi does. Mr. Modi has a number of such people whom he can use. And he does use them intelligently. Rahul Gandhi at times is surrounded by people who organizationally do not seem to have the bandwidth to sort of resurrect or resuscitate this party, which for a long time almost has been in ICU. I mean, you can't apply Band-Aid, when the patient requires urgent surgery.
In addition to the many weaknesses that you mentioned, Rahul Gandhi quite unlike Modi and quite unlike many other politicians, is not a great communicator. You often get the feeling when you hear him speak that he cannot express clearly what he wants to say. Is that where he stumbles?
I think that's I think Karan, and you know this better than most, we are in a multimedia age. I mean, you've adjusted from TV to digital. I think you've got to move with the times and you have to constantly communicate. And you can't, Rahul Gandhi has, to be fair to him, been treated very harshly by a section of the media. I mean, they've fallen for this pappufication of Rahul Gandhi, which was a deliberate attempt by the BJP to completely destroy Rahul Gandhi's credibility. And the media was a willing accomplice. I mean, it's astonishing the number of questions they pose to Rahul Gandhi instead of posing the question to the party in power. So I think the media has had a huge role to play, but Rahul Gandhi hasn't helped himself by not really evolving as a communicator who can really articulate, and I said this at the very outset, articulate a cohesive plan of action for the future for his party. And I'll give you an example, Karan, the urban narrative. Urban middle class India is crying out for a new narrative of change. And that narrative is a narrative which the BJP has captured by playing the politics of religious identity, but it needs a counterpoint. It needs a counterpoint that will speak on education, on health, on urban infrastructure, on the issues of an aspirational India. Now, Rahul Gandhi hasn't addressed that as a communicator. I mean, much of his communication is very similar to what it was a decade ago. It's all very well to attack Adani, Ambani, cronyism. He has every right to do so. He may speak now about the caste census, speak passionately about, jitni abadi, utna haq. All that is well. But you need to put it then within a larger framework that gives me a feeling as an aspirational Indian that you're offering me a better alternative to what Narendra Modi and the BJP represent. Because if you don't offer me that, then the as it is hostile media or a section of the media will continue to call you up, will continue to play to the BJP's tune, and Rahul Gandhi will not be successful in appealing to this younger aspirational India. That's where the Congress, just look at it across. I find it in Haryana as well. I saw it in Maharashtra, to some extent, the general elections. The urban middle class, the urban Hindu middle class in particular, is still far away from being attracted to the Congress party. That's that Hindu middle class which Rahul Gandhi is going to have to address their concerns and their anxieties in a more meaningful way by offering a stark alternative to what brand Modi represents.
Is he capable of changing along the lines you suggest he needs to, or is he by now too set in his ways?
Karan, that's again, politics is about flexibility. And I don't think Rahul Gandhi's ideological convictions are both his strength, but, in power politics, it can be a weakness because, if you say power is poison, as Rahul once said famously, then you're not willing to make the compromises that at times you may need to make to be a power politician. Look at Mr. Modi. His dealings with the Nitish Kumar, with the Chandrababu Naidu. These are people who publicly attacked the prime minister in the past. Today, they are his two most valuable allies, and he's willing to break bread with them. He used Chirag Paswan when it suited him, threw him away, now uses him again. It might happen to Eknath Shinde here in Maharashtra as well. So he's willing to be ideologically flexible if it gets him power. Rahul Gandhi, on the other hand, seems to be waging a long-term ideological battle against the RSS and what the RSS stands for. He believes that the RSS will bring in a Hindu Rashtra, that it's anti-constitution. Fair enough. You have every right to challenge the RSS and question it and believe it's anti-constitution. But that in itself, Karan, I don't think is enough. You're going to, from time to time, I mean, you've tied up at the end of the day with the Shiv Sena because I think you realize that, you needed power at that moment in Maharashtra. So can you be able to craft an alliance which is ideologically a little bit more flexible, where you don't necessarily sort of run every campaign only on a single issue, but you're able to offer a basket of issues that may be attractive to different audiences? I think Rahul Gandhi will have to sort of decide what kind of politics does he want to practice. Is it the politics of an activist ideologue, or is it a politics of a strategist power politician? And at the moment, because the Congress is basically a party of power and not of ideology, even if Rahul Gandhi wants to change it, the Congress is unwilling to fully change along with him. And that's why you've seen so many people close to Rahul Gandhi at times depart, because I don't think they can adjust to this ideological zeal that Rahul Gandhi seeks to bring into the Congress. I don't want to be seen to be harsh on Rahul Gandhi, Karan, because let's give him credit for one thing. He's been the one leader in the opposition who's consistently taken on Mr. Modi on ideological issues, which others at times are unwilling to even touch, or the seemingly inconvenient questions. But at the same time, Rahul Gandhi, I think, is someone whose very presence at the top of the Congress is not allowing the Congress at times to make those flexible adjustments that they need to do to become a more battle hardened party that can take on this machine on the other side.
Now, of all the chief ministers in the country, and I'm deliberately widening our discussion beyond Modi, Rahul, BJP, and Congress, of all the chief ministers in the country, the one that perhaps has the highest profile is Mamata Banerjee. I know from reports I get that her stock outside Bengal may have dipped, but within Bengal, she's a colossus. She's unchallenged almost. How do you explain that?
Karan, I made the point a little while ago that regional leaders are rooted in the soil of their states. They are organizationally stronger. They also have resources when they're in power. And I think Mamata Banerjee represents that kind of politics because she sort of is rooted in the soil of Bengal in a way. And she represents, in a sense, Bengali subnationalism that challenges the politics of Delhi. In a way, Jyoti Basu did the same. If the left would challenge Delhi, and he was in power for more than 2 decades. Mamata Banerjee she's a mass leader. I think, the one thing that some of the other opposition leaders could learn from her is her constant mass connect. She's out there virtually every day in some part of Bengal. Contrast that with Congress leaders who will just fly in just before an election, address a few rallies, wave hands, and believe that's enough. They've done their job. That's not enough. So I think because she's rooted in the soil of Bengal, because she has this mass connect, she's been able to almost withstand the enormous pressure that the BJP has put to try and capture Bengal. It's almost like it's the last fortress. I mean, you have Tamil Nadu and Kerala in the south and Bengal in the east, which are the last fortresses that are sort of halting the BJP's Ashwamedh Yagna, as I call it, or moving from state to state. And I think, Karan, the one reason she's succeeded is because she has been able to keep her connect with the grassroots workers. I think her problems are going to multiply because anti-incumbency will set in. The fact is that, as we've seen in recent times, some of our leaders have found themselves accused of serious corruption. And therefore, I think she faces a more challenging time going ahead. But because she maintains her mass connect and is willing to do the hard yards of power politics, she's able to still resist the BJP's challenge, because then she's seen as this Bengali folk heroine who's taking on the mighty machine from Delhi. It worked in 2021. 2026 will be undoubtedly tougher. One more thing, gender. I think, as we saw even in Maharashtra, gender is a huge issue in Indian elections. She has a huge woman vote bank, the Mahila vote bank. The BJP has crafted that in several other parts of the country. Shivraj Singh Chauhan in Madhya Pradesh did it, and it happened in Maharashtra as well. A huge leap in the BJP's woman vote. I think the Congress party, apart from the urban vote, needs to have a plan of action for the woman voter as well, or the opposition does. So I think they could learn a lesson there from Mamata Banerjee that you've got to hold on to your vote banks by constantly engaging with them, interacting with them, and thereby building your strong regional, robust identity.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch the interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.
Let's at this point, Rajdeep, move beyond political parties and some of their top leadership and talk about issues that affect the country. In the last 10 years, many people would say India has become a country where Muslims are looked down upon and often treated as second-class citizens. Savreen Singh, in a column that she wrote recently, says people sit in Delhi drawing rooms and discuss how much they hate Muslims. Do you share that concern?
I think any right-thinking Indian Karan would share that concern. Any Indian who believes in constitutional values of equal citizenship would share that concern. There is little doubt, Karan, that what we've seen in the last decade is both a worrying invisibilization of the Indian Muslim and even more worrying along with that, a demonization of the Muslim. So at one level, when you invisibilize, you mean you have a government which doesn't have a single Muslim MP in the Lok Sabha. This is not just true of 19 to 24, but even 2024. Imagine in 2019, more than 300 MPs of the ruling party, not a single Muslim. Now it's 240, not a single Muslim MP. So there's an invisibilization taking place of Muslims, and this has affected even the so-called secular parties. For example, in Maharashtra, in the Lok Sabha election, the Congress was reluctant to give a single Muslim a ticket. So no Muslim got a ticket because you thought in any constituency where a Muslim is pitted against a Hindu and there's a large Hindu population, the Muslim can't win. Now, that was not true 30, 40 years ago, and Arif Mohammad Khan could win from a Barech in Uttar Pradesh. That doesn't happen any longer. So there's that problem. But there's the other problem of the demonization. This constant attempt to project the Muslim as the enemy, to almost hold the Indian Muslim responsible for what happened 300, 400 years ago, this Babar ki aulad politics. And it's amplified, Karan, because of the role, that pernicious role, toxic role that social media plays, that this WhatsApp factories play. And it's reached the point where if I was an Indian Muslim, Karan, I would really think twice, what is my place in Indian society? And this is polite Indian society. At times, people say things now in public, which earlier they might have said behind closed doors. I mean, it's almost as if you're holding the Indian Muslim to some higher standard of patriotism constantly because of his or her religion. And I think the role the media has played, Karan, is particularly, for me, after 35 years, 36 years, you've been there longer, is particularly disturbing. When I see the kind of headlines or the kind of debates that take place, so-called debates, I mean, it's designed to push the Indian Muslim constantly into a corner as if he or she is constantly on death. And Karan, you recall last year, a railway police constable went around a train identifying people who look like Muslims and then shooting at them. And when he was asked, why are you doing it? Arey, humne media mein dekha hai ki wo sab to Pakistani hai. I mean, just think about this. What have we done? And that, to my mind, Karan, I think is for me deeply troubling, that we haven't been able to arrest this slide of, into this dark abyss that leaders talk about, the kind of slogans that we hear at times are designed, batenge to katenge. It's not really about, unifying India. It's about unifying a particular section of Indians by holding the other group as the enemy within. And, it doesn't, of course, some of the Indian Muslim leaders in this country have not helped their cause by some of the statements they made. I saw before the Maharashtra election, some Muslim clerics saying that those who vote for Modi should be socially boycotted. Those Muslims who vote for Modi should be socially boycotted. All of that sort of stokes the fears and anxieties from the other community. But net, Karan, there are people, there are people who, these walls of hatred. I mean, how are we going to break? India was not meant to be, I'm sorry to get emotional, India was not meant to be Pakistan. right? Our freedom project, and we are going to reach 75 years of the Republic in a month from now, was meant to be about equal citizenship. Every Indian, irrespective of religion. That was what the Ambedkarite dream was. That was what the Nehruvian dream was. It's being, before our eyes, being dismantled by this belief of a majoritarian India. And I shudder to think what would happen if there's no pushback on that. And that's where I believe the pushback must come, if not from politicians, then from civil society and from the media. Then we have to adhere to certain basic constitutional values that treat every Indian as equal, and not, Muslims, or ghettoize the Muslims, and they've got ghettoized as a result. Muslims are increasing. I was in Malegaon and I could see the ghettoization and the crumbling of infrastructure there. So the Muslims are ghettoized and the Hindus are seemingly, almost triumphal at times. And it creates a very, very dangerous situation. We've seen it in Sambal. We could see it in other parts of the country in the future. I mean, is 2024 India going to go back to finding out whether there was a temple below a mosque in some corner of the country? Or are we going to focus on building better roads, better schools, better hospitals, better education opportunities, better job opportunities for the young? Karan, these are the issues that our political parties are not wrestling with enough. And I don't see that changing because we've got trapped in this politics of polarization.
Let me push this point one step further. These days, and you know this as well as I do, incidents of bulldozer justice, accusations of love jihad, cattle lynching, or just hate speech targeted at minorities are commonplace. You can count 3-4 instances happening practically every single day. They trouble people like you and me. Do they trouble the majority of our countrymen the same way?
Karan, I don't know whether they do anymore. I think most Indians today, if you say democracy khatre mein hai, they will laugh you off because they believe at the end of the day, we are a country which is growing at 5.4% now, but we are among the fastest growing economy in the world. One of the things that has changed also is delivery of goods and services. I didn't mention this in my first answer, but I think there is one reason why Mr. Modi has been so successful over such a long period of time. A friend of mine called it the Hind factor. That's Hindutva, infrastructure, nationalism, and delivery. Delivery of goods and services in the digital age. And Mr. Modi has pushed that, and you've got to give him credit for that, has evangelized that, has meant that a number of Indians feel that so long as I get my delivery of goods and services, democracy, which is an intangible, or constitutional values, which are an intangible, don't matter. What really matters is, am I getting the delivery of services that are promised? Now, that could include the 1,500 rupees I get under the Ladli Bahin, or it could include a lovely coastal road that I've now got in Mumbai. So when I've got those basic services, or if I'm getting a kind of income, I don't really care about the values of democracy. And I think the general public is becoming cynical of politicians, rightly so, some would say, because when you shift sides so often, when there's, mass defections of politicians, governments are formed and broken, the public is cynical and says, Hamam mein sab nange hain. So what is this democracy that you talk about? So I think that's the problem. But I think the urban middle class, which was once idealistic, has become so cynical that, and unfortunately at times even spiteful towards the otherization of groups, that they don't really care enough about the values of democracy that you just spoke about, or the values of constitutionality that we just spoke about, Karan.
Let's at this point, Rajdeep, once again broaden our discussion. Let's talk a little about the system, so to speak. Every time the opposition loses an election, they blame either electronic voting machines or the election commission directly. Most recently, it happened in Maharashtra. Before that, it happened in Haryana. It said the machines were rigged, or more votes were counted than people voted, or the turnout increased suspiciously after the polls officially closed. How do you view these charges that are thrown around about EVMs, about the Election Commission?
Karan, I really think that this EVM is an excuse for the inadequacy of the opposition. I mean, you ran a shambolic campaign in Maharashtra, Karan. For 3 months, the opposition kept fighting over who will be chief minister in the belief that the Lok Sabha election victory in Maharashtra would guarantee them a Vidhan Sabha election. At the same time, the BJP was working on welfare schemes like Ladki Bahin or direct income benefit schemes like Ladki Bahin, was getting its act together, was cost correcting. And then when the results come, you blame EVMs. I need far more prima facie evidence of EVM manipulation before I say EVMs in any way are responsible for an election defeat. But Karan, I think the Election Commission of India suffers from a serious credibility deficit because it's been so non-transparent and opaque, doesn't answer the pressing questions that are pushed before it. Then can you tell us why in 537 out of 542 Lok Sabha constituencies was there a mismatch between votes polled and votes counted? No answer. Can you tell us, for example, why do you have a five-phase poll in Maharashtra in the general elections when there is no history in Maharashtra of violence, and you can have Tamil Nadu can go for a single phase? Can you tell us, for example, what have you done to curb money power, the single biggest menace to elections in this country? So the Election Commission doesn't answer the necessary questions. There was this talk of a surge after 5 p.m. I think there is enough empirical evidence to suggest that that can be answered. But why doesn't the commission answer it? Why doesn't the commission give us real-time data, hour by hour, 5 p.m., 6 p.m., right up to 11:30, rather than suddenly announce a percentage at 11:30? Give us absolute numbers. All of this is possible. I don't believe at this time that electronic voting machines have been manipulated or they've been changed. I need evidence of that. That at the moment, I think a lot of the politicians who are talking about this are doing it without hard evidence that they have. They sort of look at some social media video and put it out. But I think the Election Commission, Karan, like so many institutions in this country, has taken a huge credibility hit in the last decade. And unless the Election Commission is willing to address the pressing questions that people have for it, this EVM issue will continue to tangle. The VVPAT issue, should we have 100% VVPAT? Maybe we should, just for one election, have it, so that people know an element of confidence is restored in the system. Why can't the Election Commission meet the opposition, all parties, before the election, after the election, immediately address all questions, settle all doubts? I think we've become, I think the credibility crisis, Karan, is what has led us into this EVM tangle. You were part of the ballot box generation. It's not as if ballot boxes always were necessarily fair. There were ballot boxes which would be stolen. But my own belief is we are going to have to, at some stage, relook at the system now, because I think the credibility crisis has reached the point where eventually you could have what happened in Bangladesh in the past, where the opposition would say we are boycotting the elections unless we are convinced they are free and fair. Indian elections, Karan, and I say this in my book, and this is a major part of the book, are not free and fair because there's no level playing field. The enforcement agencies are used against opposition chief minister or opposition leaders, and the enforcement agency won't function in BJP ruled states. The role of the media, the role of money power, all of this has led to a non-level playing field. And I think that's the issue that needs to be addressed urgently if democracy is to be strengthened.
Now, enforcement agencies and investigation agencies are frequently misused. You know that, I know that, and politicians know it better than both of us. But beyond that, are our institutions coming under political pressure? Is Parliament failing to adequately voice opposition viewpoints? Is the judiciary unable to stand up to the government on issues that would embarrass the government? Has the media compromised its independence?
Karan, I think that's really the nub of, you've raised several questions in that one question, but it ultimately comes down to, I think, institutional integrity over time getting systematically undermined. It's not as if this didn't happen before 2014. Let's get that very clear. The CBI was then a caged parrot. It's not as if Indira Gandhi didn't impose the emergency. It's not as if Indira Gandhi didn't supersede judges. It's not as if Indira Gandhi didn't expect a committed bureaucracy or indeed other Congress Prime Minister Narasimha Rao used agencies to target his political opponents. Rajiv Gandhi brought the defamation bill in. So there have been instances, glaring instances, where opposition, the whole Ayaram, Gayaram culture was brought in when the Congress was in power. Governments were routinely dismissed under Article 356. So the Congress committed a host of series of dare I say, glaring attacks on our constitutional system and democracy. But I think now it's become more brazen, and that's the difference. I think Parliament has become, we're seeing it becoming increasingly a notice board at times for the government to use and misuse. You rarely have the kind of robust debates that we hope we would have on an issue like Manipur, for example, festering for months, and yet you don't have a serious debate on Manipur in Parliament, barring one no confidence motion that was there. So Parliament gets routinely disrupted. The Prime Minister rarely, if ever, attends Parliament. The judiciary, you mentioned, I think there, is facing is also being questioned at times. Is the judiciary truly holding those in power to account? Do they have different rules? If a Kashmiri or a Umar Khalid is kept in jail for months and years on end, and you don't give him bail, but a high-profile journalist the courts will open on a Saturday and give him bail. The media, questions will and should be raised. Are we really telling truth to power, asking questions of those in power? Are we hostage to all kinds of pressure? So I think all of this is happening, Karan. It's just that it's not as if it didn't happen before 2014. It's just happening a little bit more brazenly and directly at times, and therefore it's in your face, and we wonder whether there is going to be any pushback or any change. We thought that the election results of 2014, of 2024, were almost like an interval, as I call it in my book, that people thought that, from an area of darkness, at least we are seeing now a political contest which will restore some element of institutional integrity. But I don't know, Karan. I just think that that all those questions that you raised are really truisms that we have no answers for anymore. We have all the questions, we have no answers.
Let me ask you a focused question on journalism. You've spent your entire career as a journalist. What's your opinion of the Indian media today? Are you someone who's disillusioned with your own profession because of the way it's behaved and conducted itself for the last decade at least?
Karan, I am what I call a 50-50 person. So I look at India as a half glass full and half glass empty. I think we've seen certainly a large section of the media finding itself completely compromising on the core values of this profession. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And that leaves me hugely disillusioned, particularly because some of them over the years have been colleagues that I work closely with. And to see them practice the kind of journalism that they have over the last 10 years, virtually being even endorsing at times communal dog whistles, has been, yes, disillusioning, disturbing. It's left me at times, honestly. I saw your program where Dushyant Dave said he can't sleep at night at times over what happens in the judiciary. And honestly, I've had sleepless nights as well, asking myself questions about what's happened to this profession that I so treasure so much. I haven't, it leaves you feeling very, very uneasy. But at the same time, I've also seen a lot of young journalists with idealism do very good stories, still report with courage. And therefore, I'm not willing to say, like sab neta chor hai, ki sab patrakar is tarah ke hain. There are very good journalists as well in this country. There is some very fine reporting done. I remember even the Dainik Bhaskar, the stories that they did during COVID 2. COVID 2 and COVID 2 in particular really required many of the hard questions to be asked of government. And in my book, I raised many of them. And I think those are the questions that journalists did ask. At great cost at times, the bodies that were floating in the Ganga, the manner in which a Kumbh Mela was allowed just before COVID 2, and that really only showed that the government had let its guard down. I think there are journalists who still ask the right questions of all. I'm not saying just ask them of the center, ask them of your state governments. There are journalists, but the spaces are shrinking, Karan. I've been privileged in a way, at least at India Today, to be fair to them. I have really, been allowed far greater space than I could have imagined. But I think a lot of other journalists have just not been either given the space or not, or have just compromised far too easily. And therefore, the Indian media current requires a separate book, which maybe you should write one day, or we should write together, or lots of us should write together about all the challenges that we face. I think the Indian media is at the moment part of the problem and not the solution.
Two last questions, Rajdeep, before I let you go, because these are interesting issues that are in the news, and I think it's important that issues that people talk about should be addressed by you today. Someone who has sharply divided public opinion is former Chief Justice Chandrachud. His supporters believe he is perhaps the best Chief Justice we've had for decades. His critics have few kind words to say about him and believe the sooner his legacy is forgotten, the better for the country. As someone, I'm sure, who's thought about it, what's your assessment of Justice Chandrachud?
I almost joined the same chamber as Justice Chandrachud when I came back from Oxford in 1988. Everyone I knew at the time over the years said he was one of the brightest legal minds that we've had. And I think he has shown from time to time in his judgments that he is someone who represents some of the finer values of a progressive democracy. But I think Justice Chandrachud, particularly with, for example, the observation on in the Gyanvapi mosque case, or indeed in the manner in which certain cases were assigned in the roster to judges who simply would not look at individual rights and liberties in the manner that maybe Justice Chandrachud himself would have, has left a lot of questions to be answered. And I think that's disappointing, because I guess we thought an individual judge as Chief Justice could transform a system that was clearly on the back foot. Just before him, you had a Chief Justice who immediately later becomes a Rajya Sabha MP. Before that, you had a couple of other Chief Justices over the years against whom there were question marks over even their individual integrity. Chandrachud was someone who certainly no one questioned his integrity as a judge. And therefore, when he delivered judgments of the kind that he at times did, or observations, there was an element of feeling that had he let people down. I think the jury is still out. I think it would be fair to give Justice Chandrachud an opportunity to respond to his critics and answer them. I hope he does, because I think the problem, Karan, is because we've become so hyper-polarized, and this is true of the media as much as the judiciary. Someone is targeted as Godi media, someone is targeted as Darbari. There's a middle ground, and the middle ground requires a more nuanced approach to assessing the career of a judge, or indeed maybe the career of an editor. But I just wish that there were moments, perhaps, that Justice Chandrachud, for example, on Kashmir, when there were habeas corpus petitions that were pending for a long time, maybe he could have said far more in the Maharashtra defection judgment, which sort of was kept lingering for so long. I think these individual judgments will put up questions over Justice Chandrachud's tenure. But I don't think we should look at it as black and white. I think there are elements of gray, nuances. There was a number of judgments that he also delivered that were very positive at times, decriminalizing his views on LGBTQ and on gay rights. I think Chandrachud is a judge who I think we will require a far more nuanced, objective assessment, rather than just say, "Oh, you let us down badly," or the other side virtually sort of using. I mean, do we use that picture that he had with the Prime Minister at his puja to sort of, in some ways, suggest that Justice Chandrachud had sort of compromised before the executive? I would rather give him there the benefit of the doubt. Whatever little I've known of him, I think he is, at a personal level, someone who genuinely wanted the independence of the judiciary. Was he always successful in that regard? The jury is out, Karan. I think I've been a little careful in my answer because I just think that I think you can't answer that kind of question with a sort of yes and no as we tend to do that, which is the part of the problem of being in such a hyper polarized environment that we are in at the moment.
Finally, Rajdeep, and I ask this question because Parliament is in session. In addition to Delhi, should Parliament hold a certain number of minimum sittings each year in a major South Indian city? Would that help bridge the North-South separation? Some call it a North-South gap that's beginning to worry people.
I think Parliament, like so many institutions, needs a total reboot. And you've given a great idea. It's not about having a minimum number of sittings in a South Indian city, but ensuring that Parliament functions. I mean, you're a great admirer of the Westminster model of Parliament. One of the things is the Prime Minister of that country is available for question hour once a week. Correct me if I'm wrong. In India, we just don't have that. I mean, if the Prime Minister as the leader of the House is not available to answer questions, if there is no cut and thrust of debate, then whether you have the Parliament sitting south of the Vindhyas, in the east, west, will make no difference. You need Parliament to function effectively as the voice of the people. And you need, therefore, Parliament to take up issues that concern the people. Why can't Parliament have a debate on air pollution, an issue that comes year after year, for which state governments in the center are unable to find a seeming solution? Debate it, come up with solutions, and then implement them. But you made the north-south point, Karan, and I think going ahead, that's going to be important. Because with delimitation in a couple of years, if it comes through post the census, there's a growing sense when you go south of the Vindhyas of a feeling of not being given their due. That here are these economically advanced states which have got their population under control. Why should we be penalized for it? A growing distancing at times with Delhi. And the issues of building a more federal the issues of federalism will continue to tangle us if we don't address them now. I think this is another big challenge that any government will face, Karan, that you can't have political power concentrated only in and around Delhi and other states feel left out, particularly opposition ruled states feel left out. So whether it's fiscal federalism, whether it's political federalism, I think these are issues that will have to be addressed. The problem, Karan, is in all the noise that we have across news media in particular, very rarely do we have a serious debate on these questions. I want to flag off another issue, Karan, with North-South, which is job opportunities. I travel across this country on my reportage and I see young people struggling to be either employed or be employable. Now, who is debating that? Where is the serious debate taking place, Karan, on these issues? And therefore, my worry is that in our obsession with either individual leaders or political parties and what happens to them, I think the real issues are going to get lost in the public discourse, and that would be a pity because that would again enfeeble democracy. Democracy should be at the end of the day about addressing people's concerns. I'm sorry I've gone away from your original question, but I think I'm trying to raise the issues that I hope our parliamentarians do or are allowed to do.
Raji, thank you very much for your rich, fruitful, gripping, and I will add extremely honest answers. You've given an awful lot for the audience to think about. And before I end, let me hold up your book once again. There it is. It's called 2024, The Election That Surprised India. And it's a book I recommend you read. Not only will you understand the mysteries and secrets behind that election of 2024, but in the process, you will also get to understand a lot of the history of India over the last 5 years, maybe even over the last decade. That, I would personally add, is one of the greatest contributions of this book, an attempt to understand what's happened in our country the last
Karan,
10
can I just for a moment, in the media answer, there was something which I've said in the book. I just wanted, because being in the media, I think I should sort of reflect on that. Don't forget the manner in which a number of small media houses have been targeted in this country. I really feel, you asked me about, are you disillusioned? I'm just re-emphasizing that. When I saw fellow journalists, many of them young, many of them idealistic, many of them I admire, senior journalists being raided early in the morning at 6 a.m., their mobile phones being snatched. Some of them have not even been given back their mobile phones, their computers being seized. I'm talking about NewsClick, what happened to NewsClick and other small media organizations in different parts of the country. I hope someone consistently speaks up for them, because they are the ones who deserve all the support that they can get. Karan, I'm sorry I missed that out. So I wanted to say that, and that leaves me disillusioned, dare I say, and at times almost feeling helpless.
I'm glad you raised them. They are the unsung heroes that deserve our support. They have yours, they have mine. I hope they have the audiences as well. Thank you very much indeed, Rajdeep. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you, Karan. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Karan Thapar. Over the last few years, I hope you've been watching my program, The Interview on the Wire. During that period, I've interviewed doctors, politicians, businessmen, scientists, authors, and even the occasional Nobel laureate. For me, it's been exciting. I hope it's been enjoyable for you. But these, as you know, are tough times, and if this program is going to remain bold, independent, and sometimes even defiant, then I think we need your support. At the end of the day, it's a truism, but editorial independence is best defended by the viewers. So if you would like this program to remain the way it is, forthright, outspoken, and interesting, then would you consider supporting us? All you have to do is to click on the description at the bottom. But more than anything else, I hope you will continue to watch The Interview. Your viewership means an awful lot to me.